So imagine you're sitting in a doctor's office, right?
Yeah.
You've just been diagnosed with a pretty severe condition. Let's say it's advanced diabetes.
Right.
And the doctor looks you dead in the eye, pulls up your blood work, and just lays the whole situation out with absolute, like, mathematical clarity.
Just giving you the hard facts.
Exactly. They say, look, if you keep consuming massive amounts of processed sugar, it is going to fundamentally destroy your biological systems.
Yeah, your kidneys fail, vision goes.
Right. It is a biological certainty. The law of cause and effect is not going to spare you.
Gravity always wins.
So you listen intently, you look back at the doctor, perfectly calm, nod respectfully at their medical degree on the wall, pop a piece of candy into your mouth and reply, "I'll be fine. Nothing will happen to me."
I mean, it is just the ultimate picture of cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
It really is.
Because in that scenario, you aren't calling the doctor a liar.
No, I don't.
You acknowledge their expertise, you respect the authority, you probably even pay their exorbitant consultation fee.
Oh, for sure.
But functionally, you're living as if the fundamental laws of biology, like the strict physical mechanics of cause and effect, simply don't apply to your specific exceptional physiology.
You essentially believe you can just cheat the math.
Right. You think you're the exception.
And we are using this exact analogy to drop right into the core of today's deep dive because we're unpacking a really specific, honestly radical socioeconomic reading of a religious text.
Yeah, and we need to be clear about the angle here.
Right. Specifically, we are looking at the work of the Islamic scholar Allama Parvez and his interpretation of Surah Al-Fatir. That's chapter 35 of the Quran, verses 24 through 35.
And setting the analytical boundaries right now is crucial.
Yeah.
We are looking at his arguments strictly as a structural framework. We're basically reporting on an intellectual architectural blueprint.
Not a theology lesson.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Parvez's core assertion here is that these ancient texts should not be read as abstract, mystical promises about some ethereal afterlife, but rather as a hard-hitting, highly rational, socio-economic program meant to build a functional, anxiety-free society in the physical world.
Right here, right now. Which brings us right back to our diabetic patient eating candy.
The cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, because Parvez uses this exact kind of analogy to redefine a concept called taksib.
Right, which is usually a pretty standard historical term.
Yeah, traditionally, historically, that word just gets translated as rejection or like calling someone a liar.
Yeah.
The conventional narrative you always hear is that ancient civilizations collapsed because a prophet or a warner came to them, and the society literally called them a liar to their face. So the society was destroyed by divine intervention.
But Parvez looks at the linguistic and historical context and completely upends that narrative.
He flips it.
Totally flips it. Because the text states that a warner or a messenger has been sent to every single nation.
Right, it's universal.
Exactly. To Parvez, this proves the Quranic system is not just a localized 7th century Arab export, it is a universal program.
A civilizational blueprint.
Right. He argues that every major civilization, at various stages of its development, has been presented with the same fundamental societal physics.
Which is what, exactly?
The call to build a just, productive, equitable order that doesn't just hoard wealth at the top.
Oh, okay, but those civilizations often collapsed anyway. I mean, the Roman Empire, the Bronze Age societies, massive dynasties, they all eventually fractured and fell apart.
Oh, absolutely.
And traditionally, the religious explanation is that they collapsed because of that taksib, right? That rejection.
Yes, but Parvez points out this fascinating historical contradiction regarding the original audience of this specific text.
The Quraysh tribe in Mecca.
Right. The Quraysh didn't actually call the messenger a liar, did they?
No, historically they famously called him al-Amin.
Which translates to the honest or the trustworthy.
Yeah, they trusted him to hold their valuables. They didn't doubt his personal character or his sanity at all.
So Parvez asks the critical question here. What does it actually mean when the text says they rejected the message?
Because it wasn't a verbal denial.
No, it was practical rejection.
Okay, I want to really push on the mechanics of that practical rejection, because that's a big shift.
Go for it.
It's a society acknowledging a rule but functionally evading it. Think about the laws of aerodynamics.
Okay.
You can build a terribly unaerodynamic plane, like a literal brick, And if you strap a massive enough jet engine to it, you can force it into the sky.
Right, with enough power, sure.
Yeah, you use sheer thrust to temporarily overcome gravity. But eventually, the fuel runs out, the engine fails, and the physics of gravity pull that brick right out of the sky.
Yeah, you can't cheat gravity forever.
So is Parwez basically arguing that military might and hoarded wealth act as that temporary thrust for unjust civilization?
Oh, that is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Yes, exactly.
So they're just flying a brick.
They're flying a brick.
Yeah.
The failure of past empires wasn't due to pure ignorance of this program.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Romans understood that mass inequality bred instability.
The French aristocracy definitely understood that starving peasants were a huge risk.
Right. Their takzib, their rejection, was the profound civilizational hubris of thinking their specific power structures made them immune to the natural consequences of an unjust society.
They thought their jet engine would never run out of fuel.
They thought they could defy gravity forever.
So they acknowledged the math of economic collapse, like, say, a nation with hyperinflation driven by extreme wealth hoarding at the top.
Yeah.
But the leadership continues to extract wealth anyway, fully believing that somehow they will be the exception to the rule.
And Parwez treats these socioeconomic laws as basically indistinguishable from physical natural laws.
How so?
Well, when the sun shines on the ocean, the water evaporates. When the atmospheric pressure drops and condensation occurs, it rains.
Basic earth science.
Right. And he asks, do the clouds ever practice taksib? Does the ocean ever reject the law of evaporation?
No, of course not.
No. The physical universe operates on absolute mechanics. Parwez argues that the socio-economic world operates on equally absolute mechanics.
Right.
If you build a society on oppression, extreme inequality, and the exploitation of labor, the systemic gravity will eventually pull it down.
It's mathematically inevitable.
Yes. And to believe otherwise, while claiming you respect the universal law, that is the true definition of practical rejection.
Wow, and he takes this a step further, doesn't he? He levels a pretty harsh critique at modern audiences who treat the text merely as a source of ritualistic blessings.
Oh, he really goes after that.
Yeah, he mentions people reading the text just to get, 30 good deeds per letter.
Yeah, he finds that approach structurally absurd.
Just reading it for the points.
Right. He argues against reducing a comprehensive socioeconomic program into a hollow incantation.
It's like holding the architectural blueprints for a structurally sound, earthquake-proof building.
Yeah.
But instead of actually pouring concrete and laying rebar, you're just standing there reciting the dimensions of the bricks over and over again.
Hoping the building magically constructs itself.
Exactly. And meanwhile, the society you are currently living in is actively collapsing around you.
Right.
But wait, I gotta jump in here. Isn't that incredibly dangerous?
What part?
The blueprint part. Historically, whenever people try to implement religious texts as literal state blueprints, we end up with brutal theocracies.
Oh, absolutely.
We get moral policing, authoritarianism, rigid hierarchies that usually oppress the exact people they claim to be saving. So how does Parwez avoid that trap?
That is the essential friction point in his entire body of work.
How is his universal program different from just a theocratic mandate?
He avoids the theocracy trap by arguing that the Quranic program is fundamentally about economics and structural equity, not moral policing.
Okay.
He frequently critiques religious establishments that focus obsessively on personal rituals while totally ignoring systemic poverty.
So the focus is material, not behavioral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For Parwez, a state that enforces strict moral codes but allows immense wealth disparity, exploitative labor practices, or monopolies, that state is entirely failing the program.
Because a theocracy uses religion to consolidate power at the top.
Right, and Parwez argues the program's sole purpose is to permanently decentralize power and guarantee universal material security at the bottom.
Okay, so if the inevitable result of ignoring this program is the collapse of the civilization,
Yeah.
and the traditional power structures always resist it because they obviously benefit from the hoarding, who actually builds it?
That is the big question.
Right. If you have this blueprint for an equitable society, who executes it in the real world?
This moves us right into the second major phase of his analysis, the inheritance of the book.
Okay.
The text describes the people who, quote, inherit this program. And rather than giving a theological ranking of piety, Parwez says it divides them into a highly specific sociological spectrum.
A spectrum of human capital.
Exactly. It lists 3 categories: those who wrong themselves, the moderates, and the pioneers.
Let's really break down the mechanics of those three groups, because viewing this through a sociological lens changes everything.
It does.
Whenever a transformative social movement begins, whether it's like the civil rights movement, early labor organizing, or a massive shift in economic policy, you always see this exact distribution.
Always.
Let's start with the first group, those who wrong themselves.
Right. So in Parwez's framework, these are individuals who exist within the society or the movement, but their actions actively sabotage the collective good.
But they're in the movement.
Yeah, they might intellectually agree that an equitable society is better, but they're trapped by the inertia of the old system.
Oh, okay.
They prioritize short-term, individualistic gains over long-term collective stability.
So by hoarding resources or finding a loophole to exploit, they think they're getting ahead?
Right. But they are structurally wronging themselves because they're destabilizing the exact system they actually rely on for survival.
Wow, okay. Then you have the second group, the moderates. I imagine this is, what, the vast majority of any population?
Almost certainly.
They don't actively exploit the system, but they aren't going to stick their necks out to change it either, right?
Exactly. They follow the prevailing winds. If the society is corrupt, they just keep their heads down. If the society is equitable, they participate normally.
They're just trying to get by.
Right. They are the passive participants. Sociologists often refer to this as the early majority and late majority in the diffusion of innovations theory.
So they require the system to already be functional before they fully commit their energy to it.
Yes, which leaves the entire burden of building the system on the third group,
The pioneers.
the vanguard. The text calls them those foremost in good deeds.
These are the people expending immense physical and psychological capital to establish the new socio-economic order.
They are the engine of the entire thing. A successful vanguard doesn't just theorize. They have to build the material proof of concept.
But, I mean, the math here seems completely unbalanced.
How so?
If you are trying to execute a massive shift in how economics and society function, how does a tiny vanguard sustain any forward momentum when the vast majority of the population is either actively self-sabotaging or just sitting on the fence?
It's incredibly difficult.
Doesn't the movement just get absorbed by the status quo?
It does. Unless the pioneers can fundamentally shift the material reality of the moderates.
Okay, so it has to be tangible.
Very tangible. This is where we look at the historical mechanics of a vanguard. A vanguard fails when it becomes elitist, right? When it tries to dictate ideology without actually changing material conditions.
Like the failed vanguardism in the 20th century where intellectual elites tried to force a system on an unwilling populace?
Yes, which almost always results in authoritarianism. But Parwez argues the Quranic pioneers operate entirely differently.
Because they don't force compliance.
Right. They don't force it. They generate such undeniable material proof of concept that the new system basically becomes irresistible.
They pull the Overton window by just proving the math works.
Exactly.
Like, if they can establish a microeconomy or a localized structure where people see actual stability, where healthcare, housing, basic needs are genuinely secured without exploitation, the moderates will naturally abandon the old failing system.
Because it makes sense to.
Yeah.
The pioneers carry the initial burden of proving that the socio-economic laws actually work when applied.
Right.
The moderates join when the perceived risk of joining the new system becomes lower than the perceived risk of staying in the old, collapsing system.
Even those who wrong themselves are eventually compelled to align their behavior.
Yeah, because the new equitable structure becomes the dominant, secure reality.
Okay, so what happens when the pioneers fail? Or, what happens before they succeed while the unjust system is still the dominant reality?
That's where things get grim.
Because the inevitable result of a hyper-capitalist, exploitive system is deeply isolating. And Parwez has a really specific linguistic take on this, doesn't he? Redefining the Arabic word yatim.
He does. The traditional translation of yatim is simply orphan. A child who has lost their parents.
Right. That's standard.
But Parwez strips away that narrow literal definition and dives into the classical linguistic roots. He argues that its core meaning signifies anyone who is entirely isolated, exceptionally vulnerable, and left utterly alone to fend for themselves.
So he applies the concept of the orphan to the entire structure of society.
Yes.
Like, if you lack a structural safety net, you are an orphan regardless of your age or your family status.
To illustrate this perfectly, Parwes explicitly references a foundational concept from Western sociology.
Oh, David Riesman's 1950 book, The Lonely Crowd.
Exactly. Riesman analyzed how modern, hyper-industrialized societies shift human character. Instead of being anchored by deep community ties, people become other-directed.
Meaning they're constantly anxious about their peers.
Right, constantly striving, yet deeply alienated.
It's the absolute paradox of the modern city. I mean, think about it. You can live in a metropolis of 10 million people.
Yeah.
You can be packed onto a subway car shoulder to shoulder with strangers, navigating a frantic multi-trillion-dollar economy. You can have thousands of followers on social media.
But structurally.
Structurally, functionally, you are completely orphaned.
Because if you lose your job on a Tuesday, or if you get a catastrophic medical diagnosis on a Wednesday, none of those 10 million people and none of those social media followers are structurally obligated to pay your rent or fund your chemotherapy.
Wow, yeah.
You are surrounded by humanity, but every single individual is carrying the entire burden of their own survival entirely alone.
There's no collective mechanism guaranteeing your existence.
None.
I always think about the modern gig economy and late-stage capitalism when we talk about this.
Oh, that's the perfect example.
Right. We have these algorithmic platforms connecting millions of consumers with millions of drivers and delivery workers in real time. It is the absolute pinnacle of technological connectivity.
But the reality for the worker?
The gig worker is the ultimate manifestation of Parwez's yatim. They have no sick leave, no guaranteed minimum wage, no healthcare benefits from the platform, and absolutely no collective bargaining power.
They are completely atomized.
Yeah, we tell them they are independent contractors, but functionally, society has orphaned them.
And Parwes argues that this isolation is not just an unfortunate byproduct. It's not a glitch in the system.
No.
It is the direct, inevitable mathematical consequence of rejecting the universal equitable program.
It's the brick plane crashing.
Exactly. When a civilization prioritizes the concentration of wealth over the distribution of security, it mathematically must create a massive, lonely crowd of functional orphans to extract that wealth from.
And the psychological toll of that structural abandonment is just staggering. We see it in modern statistics on loneliness, the rising rates of anxiety disorders, the sheer exhaustion of the working class.
People are living in a constant state of low-grade terror.
Right. You might be able to pay for groceries today, but the anxiety of tomorrow's survival is resting entirely on your own shoulders.
Which brings us to the radical alternative.
Yes, let's talk about the solution.
If the failed system creates a society of terrified, isolated orphans, what does the successful realization of this program actually look like in physical reality?
How does the text describe the outcome when the pioneers actually succeed in building the system?
Well, the verses in Surah Al-Fatir shift at this point to describe the promised reward.
And the text uses highly vivid material imagery here, right? It speaks of gardens with flowing rivers, garments made of pure silk, bracelets of gold and pearls, absolute abundance.
And conventionally, historically, this is the exact moment where theological interpretations become entirely ethereal.
The narrative shifts to the afterlife.
Right. It becomes, bear the suffering of this lonely orphan world now, endure the exploitation, and when you die in the afterlife, you will be rewarded with the silk and the gold.
The ultimate deferred compensation plan.
Exactly.
Which historically has been incredibly useful for ruling classes. I mean, if you can convince the working class that their reward is in the afterlife, they're much less likely to demand fair wages and equitable distribution in this life.
It keeps them docile. But Parwes doesn't defer to the afterlife here at all, does he?
No, he argues with absolute conviction that these verses are not describing an afterlife fantasy.
He reads them as metaphors for the actual material conditions of a working collective socio-economic system built right here on Earth.
The Gardens of Eden are a working economy.
An economy that has mastered both production and equitable distribution. Think about the metaphors he's decoding here.
Okay.
Gardens with flowing water represent agricultural mastery, food security, an environment that is pleasing and unpolluted.
Makes sense.
The silk, the gold, the pearls, these represent the pinnacle of material refinement, technological advancement, and high-quality industrial output.
So Parwes argues that the Quran is describing the system's output in physical, social terms.
Yes, the goal of the universal program isn't collective poverty or asceticism, it is collective abundance.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here again.
Do it.
Usually when historical texts talk about gold bracelets and garments of silk, it sounds exactly like an elite class hoarding wealth. It sounds like an aristocracy. When we look at ancient Rome or the Persian Empire, they had silk, they had gold, they had incredible agricultural gardens. How is Parwez's reading of this Eden any different from just describing a wealthy ruling class exploiting the masses?
That is the exact tension Parwez addresses, and it is where his reading becomes genuinely revolutionary.
Okay, walk me through it.
He points out that in those historical empires, the luxuries did exist, but they were violently restricted to a tiny elite.
The masses were structurally orphaned to produce that wealth.
Right. The radical nature of Parwez's reading is the democratization of luxury.
Democratization of luxury.
Yes. The Eden described in these texts is a society where high-quality provision, beautiful environments, and adornment are secure and available to all, erasing class distinctions entirely.
But how on earth do you democratize luxury without bankrupting the system or destroying the incentive to produce?
It's the ultimate economic puzzle.
Right. Even in...
No, not at all. He asked a logistical question. He said, "Can you guarantee me that every single citizen in the furthest reaches of the state has access to this fine wheat bread?"
And obviously, given the supply chains and the massive geographic spread of the state at that moment, they couldn't guarantee it.
Not a chance. The distribution networks just weren't capable of universal delivery of the premium good yet.
So what did he do?
Umar replied that until he had structural assurance, until the state's logistical apparatus could guarantee that the lowest citizen was eating the fine wheat, he would not touch it. Parwez uses this to explain the core mechanism of the Quranic Eden. It's not about an economy where wages are dictated by the brutal calculus of supply and demand.
Where a massive underclass is paid the absolute minimum required to keep them alive while a few enjoy the surplus.
Exactly.
It's a complete inversion of how we think about surplus value. Like in Marxist economic theory, the critique of capitalism is that the worker produces a certain amount of value. The capitalist pays them a fraction of that value as a wage just to survive, and the capitalist extracts the rest as surplus value or profit.
Right.
Parwez is outlining a system where the surplus isn't extracted by an elite. It is structurally guaranteed to the population.
The text refers to this concept as fadl, which translates to abundance or surplus. Parwez argues that the collective system must guarantee not just bare survival, but a surplus that covers all human needs and dignities.
So if a person's individual labor capacity, maybe due to illness, age, or systemic shifts, doesn't yield enough to live beautifully, the collective system provides the fadl.
Exactly. The surplus of the society is utilized to ensure everyone's standard of living is raised to the societal baseline.
So no one is left behind to eat the coarse barley while a few eat the fine wheat. The goal of the economic engine is to elevate everyone to the fine wheat. It is somewhat analogous to the modern debate around universal basic income, honestly, but arguably way more comprehensive.
Oh, absolutely. A UBI often just aims to provide the bare minimum floor to prevent starvation. Parwez is talking about a system designed to provide a floor of actual prosperity. And when a society actually achieves that level of universal material security, when you build an earthly Eden where provision is deeply structurally secure for every single person, it triggers a profound shift in human psychology.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most impactful section of Parwez's analysis.
It really ties it all together.
The text pairs the material outcome with a very specific psychological outcome. The people who have successfully built and entered this state say, "All praise to Allah who has removed grief from us."
Right.
But knowing Parwez's methodology, I'm assuming he doesn't read grief as just feeling a bit melancholy.
You're entirely correct. The Arabic word used in the verse is huzn, and Parwez defines huzn not as everyday sadness. It isn't the grief of mourning a passing pet or the natural sorrow of losing a loved one. Those are inherent parts of the human condition.
Right, you can't build an economy that cures a broken heart.
Exactly. He defines huzn as the deep, structural anxiety of insecurity.
It's the background radiation of modern life.
Yes.
It is the suffocating subconscious dread of poverty. It's the fear of being excluded, of losing your job, of an algorithmic shift demonetizing your small business, or, having a medical emergency and realizing you have no share in the system's wealth.
It is the dread of becoming the yatim.
Becoming the orphan.
A truly working collective order removes this structural anxiety at the root. You cannot treat huzn with positive thinking, mindfulness apps, or meditation retreats if the economic structure you live in is actively threatening your survival.
That's such a crucial point.
And the text explicitly follows up the removal of huzn by mentioning the absence of two other highly specific conditions, nasab and laghab.
Okay, so the text pairs Huzn with Nasab and Lughub. What are those?
Physical exhaustion and mental fatigue.
But wait, surely some level of physical labor is required in any society to build this Eden, right?
Of course.
How does Parwez differentiate between healthy, productive labor and destructive Nasab?
That distinction is vital. Building and maintaining a complex society requires immense effort. But Nazab translates to a very specific kind of physical exhaustion.
The bad kind.
The kind of back-breaking, bone-grinding, alienated labor that destroys a human body just to secure a single day's meal.
So it is labor divorced from dignity.
Exactly, where the worker has no agency and reaps none of the surplus. Healthy labor builds the individual and the society. Nasab consumes the individual to feed the system.
Wow. And Lughub?
Lughub is psychological fatigue. It is the mental wear and tear, the absolute exhaustion of the mind that comes from constantly navigating a hostile, insecure environment.
It is the cognitive load of poverty.
Yes. Think of the mental bandwidth required to constantly calculate which bills you can defer this month, or the stress of navigating a labyrinthine healthcare bureaucracy just to get a basic prescription.
It's exhausting.
Parwez argues that the socio-economic garden is defined by the complete absence of these three things. Haz, the anxiety of the future. Nazib, destructive physical exploitation. And Lughub, psychological burnout.
If you remove those three things, it fundamentally alters human psychology.
Completely.
It shifts the human operating system from a state of constant survival panic to profound, unshakable stability. Like if you know inherently that the society you live in will not let you fall, will not let you become an orphan, the mental bandwidth that is freed up is almost unimaginable.
It is the absolute prerequisite for true civilizational flourishing.
Because when you aren't expending 90% of your cognitive energy just managing the anxiety of survival, humanity can actually begin to actualize.
We can focus on arts, on sciences, on deep philosophical inquiry, on genuine community.
For Parwez, the removal of Haz is the ultimate empirical indicator that the socioeconomic laws have been properly aligned with the universal program.
You can measure the success of a society not by its GDP or its military thrust, but by the absence of structural anxiety in its most vulnerable citizens.
Let's synthesize this entire arc, because tracing these 12 verses through Parwez's analytical lens reveals a staggeringly cohesive framework.
It really does.
According to this reading, Surah al-Fatir, verses 24 to 35, isn't a collection of disjointed theological statements or afterlife promises.
No, it's a unified, highly logical theory of civilizational evolution and economic mechanics.
Right. It starts with the premise that a universal socio-economic program, a blueprint for a just, anti-exploitative society, is a fundamental law of human societal physics, delivered to humanity repeatedly.
It then analyzes the sociology of the people who interact with that program, noting that they span a spectrum.
You have the self-saboteurs trapped by the inertia of greed.
The moderates waiting for proof.
And the crucial vanguard, the pioneers who must bear the burden of building the material proof of concept to shift the Overton window.
And if those pioneers succeed, if they don't succumb to the hubris of the empires that practically rejected the laws of cause and effect, they produce a tangible physical outcome.
They build a society of universal material security.
An earthly Eden where luxury and dignity are democratized.
A society that guarantees fadl, the surplus, so that no one is left as an isolated orphan in a lonely crowd of hypercapitalism.
And the ultimate crowning achievement of this material security isn't just the wealth itself, it is the psychological liberation it buys.
It is the total eradication of structural grief, huzn, physical exploitation, nasab, and psychological burnout, lughub.
Parwez is offering a vision where economic justice is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for human mental and emotional freedom.
It is a massive, highly rational architectural plan. It takes texts that are so often relegated to the realm of the purely spiritual or pushed off into the afterlife to keep the masses docile and drags them directly into the boardrooms, the parliaments, and the economic frameworks of our present reality.
It demands that we look at the mechanics of our own societies and ask whether we are building sustainable gardens or whether we are just managing exhausted crowds of orphans.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've talked extensively about the eradication of huzn, that deep structural dread of the future. Look at your own life. Look at your medical insurance, your rent, your savings account, the stability of your industry. If this interpretation of Eden is actually a socio-economic blueprint meant to be built right here, right now, what is the single biggest structural anxiety in your own life today that a truly collective, secure system would instantly erase?